the previous lecture, we have introduced the concept of a stream, and we said that for any Java program to open a file for reading or writing, it must be done through input and output stream objects. An input stream is a sequence of characters that are transferred from an input device, such as keyboard or file, to the computer. And an output stream is a sequence of characters that are transferred from the computer to the output device, such as a screen, printer, or a file. Also, we have discussed on how to create a text file as an output file using the PrintWriter class. To write into a file from scratch, assuming that the file does not exist, then you need to supply the file name as an input parameter to the PrintWriter class. However, if you want to open a file and you want to add more data to an existing file with existing data, then you need to create an object of type file output stream and supply this object as an input parameter to the constructor of the PrintWriter. To open a file for output, we follow the 3 steps. First, we open the file for writing. Second, we write into the file if the opening is successful. Third, we close the file. In today's lecture, we are going to show you how to read from a text file. And again, we are going to follow 3 steps, like what we have done for writing into a file. First, you need to open the file. Then you are going to read from the file if the opening is successful. And then we close the file. Now for step 1, for opening the file, we are going to use 2 classes. The first class is the scanner class, and you are already familiar with the scanner class. We have already used it if we want to read from the keyboard. But this time, instead of supplying system.n as an input parameter to the constructor of the scanner, we are going to supply a special object that represents the file that is created from the file class. And this is the second class. The file class contains the methods for obtaining file and directory properties, and also for renaming and deleting files and directories. However, the class does not contain the methods for reading or writing file contents. That's why we use the scanner object for reading or writing using the file object. Notice that we are creating an object of the file class on the spot and pass its reference as an input parameter to the constructor of the scanner. So there is no need to create an object of the file class and assign it to a variable, and then we pass this variable as an input parameter to the scanner. So we can do it in one shot. Also, the name of the input stream is called nFile, and we are going to use nFile whenever we want to read from the file, similar to reading from the keyboard using the methods nextInt, nextDouble, nextFloat, nextLine, and so on. But this time, instead of reading from the keyboard, we are reading from a file. But to create an object from the file class, we need to bring the file class definition. And you do that by writing import java.io.files, because the file class definition is inside java.io package. Or you can import all the classes that are inside java.io package by writing a star instead of the name of the class files. Also, like opening a file for writing, if you want to open the file for reading, you must use a try and catch a block on the exception find not found exception. So that for any reason, if there is an error occurred while opening the file for reading, then the scanner will raise an exception that is called find not found exception, and you must catch this exception by using the catch block. Inside the catch block, you can print a message and quit the program, or continue and ask the user to enter another name for the file. After opening the file successfully for reading, in step 2, you read from the file. Reading from the file is exactly the same way as if you want to read from the keyboard using the scanner methods next, nextLine, nextInt, nextDouble, and so on. But instead of dealing with the keyboard system.n stream, we are going to deal with it using the input stream name nFile. Reading from a file is not the same as writing into a file. If you want to write into a file, then you assume that you have a plenty of space so you can write as many data as you need. However, if you read from the file, you are going to read from the file line by line until you reach the end of the file. There are some special methods that are available in the scanner object that will help you to tell you whether you have reached end of file or not. These methods are exactly the same methods that we have used for reading from the keyboard, next int, next double, but they are starting with has. So these methods are Boolean methods. They return either true or false. If you are testing inside the file whether it has a next line available to read or not, then you use this method, and if it returns it true, it means there is a line that you can read from the file. And if it returns false, that means we don't have any line inside the file to read and we have reached end of file. And if you are reading as an example integer, and if you want to check whether there is an integer available in the file or not, then you can use the Boolean method has next int. And if there is integer available for reading, then the method will return it true, otherwise it will return false. So to read from the file line by line, we are going to use the Boolean method has next line to tell us whether we have a line to read inside the file or not. And we are going to use it with a while loop, because repeatedly we are going to read from the file line by line. And this will tell me whether we have reached end of line or not. So we say while the name of the input stream in file dot has next line. If there is a line to read, then it will return a true, and we go inside the loop and we read the line using the method next line. And we save the line inside a string that is called line. In the next iteration, we are going to test again whether we have a next line available in the file or not. And if it returns it true, we go inside and read the line. Otherwise, it returns false. It means we have reached end of file. And after reading from the file line by line, you need to think about how to process this line. Maybe you want to print it, maybe you want to process it for any reason. And then after we exit from the loop, that means we have reached the end of file. Then in the last step, we close the file. So these are the 3 steps that we need to follow if we want to open a text file for reading. First, we open the file. Second, we read from the file. Third, we close the file. As we have discussed before, if you want to read from a file, it is similar to reading from the keyboard using the next methods of the scanner object. However, there is a slight difference between the two. Now, if you want to read from the keyboard, and if there is data available, then the next method will read the data and convert it to the corresponding data type. However, if there is no data that needs to be read by the next method, then the computer will wait for the user to type in the input. Now, reading from a file, the situation is different. Now, if there is no data available in the file, then the computer will not wait. It will raise an exception. Imagine that you are reaching the end of file and you try to read an integer. So there is no data available. So the computer will not wait. It will raise an exception, and we don't want that to happen. So therefore, the class scanner has additional methods that will help us whether that there is available data to be read or not. For each next method, there is a corresponding Boolean method that starts with has that tells you whether there is available data to read or not. For example, if you want to read an integer, then before reading the integer, you can use this method to tell you whether there is an integer available for reading or not. So when you call this method, if the return value is true, then that means that there is an integer available for reading. So you can use next int method to read the integer. However, if it returns false, then you have 2 situations. Either the available data is not integer, or you have reached the end of file. And therefore, either you issue an error message or you stop reading from the file, assuming that you have reached the end of file. So for each method that you are going to use for reading, has the corresponding has method that is a Boolean variable will tell you whether data is available or not. And this works on keyboards as well as on files. But on keyboards, we don't use them because, as I said, if there is no data, then the computer will wait for input. But for files, they are very useful because we are going to use them to tell us whether we have reached end of file or not. This is the syntax that we are going to use if we want to open a text file for reading following the 3 steps. First, we use a try and catch block for opening the file, and we do that through a scanner object. So we define a scanner variable as an input stream and we initialize it to null. And then inside the try, we create an object of type scanner and we supply as an input parameter to the constructor of the scanner an object of type file. And inside the constructor of the object file, we supply the file name. If the opening is successful, then we will go to step 2 and read from the file. And if there is an exception raised by the scanner object, then it will be called by the catch block as a file not found exception. And inside this block, you write the necessary statements to deal with the exception. When you open the file successfully, in step 2 is reading from the file. And to read from the file, you use the scanner methods that we have used previously with the keyboard to read the data from the file. And after finishing from reading, step 3 is to close the file. Here is a typical example on following the 3 steps to read from a text file. First, we are saving the file name as a string, and we are defining the scanner by the name infile. To open the file, we are using try and catch, and in the catch block, we are printing an error message and stopping the program if the scanner raised an exception. When the file is opened successfully, we are reading from the file line by line, and we are using the method hasNextLine that is inside the scanner to tell us whether there is an available line to read or not. If there is a line available for reading, then inside the loop we are reading this line and save it into line, and we are simply printing the line on the screen. Notice that we are using a while loop, and inside the while loop we are using the method hasNextLine, and this will tell us whether we have reached the end of line or not. So if there is no data available, then hasNextLine will return false and it will stop the while loop. After finishing from reading from the file line by line, we close the file using the scanner name, and we are calling the close method of the scanner class. After learning how to read from a text file, let us have some examples showing you how to read data from a file for our programs.